Hello, I'm Fearful Ferret, and this is my random seed world record speedrun of Minecraft, completed in 19 minutes and 31 seconds. I know there are some people who are interested in learning this run, so I'm just going to do commentary over this, so you guys can use this run to learn. I'm also going to put the seed for this world in the description if you want to follow my exact movements during all this to help you out. Alright, so the first thing I look for whenever I load up a world is a village. You need to find a village with a cleric in order to complete the speedrun, because that is by far the easiest way of getting Eyes of Ender, because you can trade with a cleric to collect Eyes of Ender. One thing about this speedrun is that you can duplicate items, so you only need to collect a single copy of any item that you need, and then you can just duplicate it until you have as many as you want. There are very few items that are actually required to complete the run. One of them is food, because it's nice to be able to sprint a lot. So here I'm collecting wheat so that I can make bread later on. Another item that I would have liked to find is gold. Unfortunately, I only found iron. I can still use the iron to make armor later on, so that's still useful, but it would have been a lot better if I had found gold there. Here I'm collecting wood so I can make a crafting table, and I'm also going to use wood as a ingredient for other things that I'm going to need. So, in order to trade with the cleric to get up to Eyes of Ender, you need to have either gold ingots or rotten flesh. I already know I'm not going to be able to find gold ingots because you can only find them easily in a desert temple, jungle temple, or a blacksmith chest, and I don't see a desert nearby, I don't see a jungle nearby, and I already checked the blacksmith. So instead I'm just going to go find some rotten flesh. I can do that by exploring caves until I find a zombie, and zombies very commonly drop rotting flesh, so I'm going to search some caves until I can find that. So here I'm heading towards what seems like a cave, and it is, and I'm looking for a zombie. I find a creeper, which is whatever, they don't drop anything useful. I also get very lucky, and here I find a skeleton archer. Two other items you need to complete the game are a bow and arrows, and the skeleton archer helpfully dropped both. If I had not found that, I would have had to either find a skeleton archer later on or craft a bow and arrows, both of which are much slower than just dropping or having them dropped randomly near the start. So that was really lucky. That was also pretty much the only really lucky thing that happened during this run. Everything else was pretty much average, so this run is definitely improvable, and I made a number of mistakes, but I mean, it's better than anybody else has done, so I'm still really happy about it. So as I continue to look for caves in which I can find a zombie, I'm about to run out of food, so I'm going to duplicate bread here. You can do single item duping and multi-item duping. I'll explain them both more later because I'm going to be duping a lot during this run. Here I'm just doing single item duping so I can get a little bit more bread to allow me to sprint as I'm searching for a zombie. I actually make a pretty big mistake here, and I create a whole other world instead of just reloading that save. So I lost probably like 10 or 15 seconds just being really confused as to why am I in the ocean now? So that was a pretty bad mistake, and then I reloaded again because I'm stupid, and then I load the correct one, so we're back to the run. To find a cave, you pretty much just look around for dark places. Zombies and other enemies tend to only spawn in dark places. I think it has to be a light level of 7 or less, so the only place that'll happen naturally is just in natural caves, and because it takes far too long to dig and look for underground caves. If you've already searched a cave, you can come back about maybe half a minute to a minute later because enemies can respawn in that time. So there I was just walking around the village looking for another cave, and now I've waited long enough, so I'm going to head back to that original cave and see if any zombies have spawned there. Unfortunately, I forgot where the cave actually was, so I went in the wrong place, but then I found it again. I could also hear a zombie there. You can use audio cues like zombie sounds and skeleton sounds to help you find enemies that have drops that you need. And up here I find a zombie, and he drops rotten flesh, and I can use that to duplicate my way up to Eyes of Ender by trading with the cleric. So now I have pretty much everything I need except wool. There are 6 items that you need to collect in order to beat the game. You need food, you need either gold or rotten flesh, you need wood, you need wool, and you need a bow, and you need arrows. So long as you can collect those 6, you can complete the game, and it also helps out a lot to get either iron, gold, or diamonds to make armor. I've collected the iron, I've collected all of it except for wool. You can either find wool as the top block of a torch inside a village, but unfortunately there actually aren't any torches in this town, which is kind of rare, so I wasn't able to do that. Or you can just find a sheep and grab wool from that. So now that I've completed everything except the wool, which I can find a bit later on, I am now going to duplicate a lot of items. The method I'm using right here is multi-item duplication. You do that by dropping all of the stacks that you want to duplicate in front of you. And then you quit the game and reload it. And then you walk forward to pick up the items. And maybe about a second afterwards, you Alt F4 and quit out of the game. And then you open up the game again and reload your save. And that saves the game such that all of those items are both on the ground and in your inventory. So you'll just pick up a second copy of all of the stacks that you dropped, and that doubles all of the items that you dropped. So that is a way that you can duplicate multiple kinds of items all in one go. There's another way to do it called single item duplication, which I'm going to be using later on, and I'll explain that when that comes up. Right here I'm just looking around for a torch to find wool, but I didn't find any. Alright, so this is single item duplication. It's basically a pause buffer. What you do is you drop whatever stack you want to duplicate, and then you pause on the frame that it adds it to your inventory. So what I'm looking for is I want the item to appear in my inventory after the pause menu comes up. So if you look down on my hotbar, the rotten flesh got added to my inventory after the pause menu came up. And that means I buffered on the right frame, so I can save the game and reload it, and I'll get double of that item. The item gets added to your inventory about when it makes a quarter turn on the ground. So right as it's about to get to a quarter turn, pause the game, and then just pause, repause until you get on that frame where it's added to your inventory after the pause menu comes up. It's pretty tough to do. I mess it up a lot, but it's easy to retry, so just practice it a lot because you'll be doing it a lot during runs. So you need to trade the rotten flesh to the cleric, and he'll give you an emerald. Then you want to duplicate the emerald. Then you want to trade with the cleric to trade an emerald for Lapis Lazuli. You don't actually need that, but you need to trade for it to level up the cleric to the next tier of trades, which includes the Eye of Ender. And now I'm going to duplicate once more. Did I mess this one up? No, I still got it. Okay. And that allows me to trade for an Eye of Ender. Alright, so I need up to 12 Eyes of Ender in order to open up the exit portal. And I'm going to need a bit more than that because I also need to use the eyes to figure out where the stronghold is. So I'm going to have to duplicate Eyes of Ender 5 times to get up to 32. And here I'm using multi-item duplication to continue duplicating stuff, including those Eyes of Ender. So if you think you might need more of something, just duplicate it along with your multi-item dupes in the town and you should be fine. So I'll be duplicating items 4 more times after this. I don't show my desktop as I'm duplicating items because I'd just rather not show it. But what's happening during that screen is I'm just at my desktop and reopening Minecraft from the launcher. There's one other thing I'm going to do before I leave town, and that is make iron armor. Diamond armor is superior to iron, and iron is better than gold, so iron is good armor to have. You're going to be doing basically suicide bombing strats on the Ender Dragon, so the more armor you have, the easier that ending fight will be, and the less likely you'll be to just kill yourself. Speaking of which, the reason that you need wool, which I don't have yet, is that you need to make beds, and you make beds out of wool and wood. The reason you need beds is if you use a bed in the end, where the Ender Dragon is, it will blow up, and the explosion deals a lot of damage to everything around it, including you and the Ender Dragon. So instead of taking a very long time to shoot the Ender Dragon with a bow, you can just blow up 3 or 4 beds under him, and he'll die. It's a very, very kind of cool way of defeating the Ender Dragon, and it's not a bug. That is an intended bit. There are also some ways that you can mess around with your inventory to make crafting items a bit faster. I'm still in the process of learning a lot of those. I only started learning this speedrun about a week ago, so there's still a lot of just basic menu stuff that I can improve on. Alright, so after this duplication, I'll have pretty much everything I'll need to complete the game, other than the beds, so I'm going to use the Eyes of Ender to find the stronghold. If you use an Eye of Ender, it will travel to the stronghold, and that will allow me to figure out where it is, because the stronghold has the ending portal, and once you activate and go through the ending portal, you get to the end, which has the Ender Dragon, and then once you defeat the Ender Dragon, he spawns the portal, and once you enter that portal, you get to the credits and beat the game. So yes, Minecraft does have an ending, you can speedrun it, people have, and honestly it's a fun speedrun, so I enjoy it. Here I'm looking around for sheep, but there aren't any, so I'm just going to keep going to the stronghold and hope that I can find sheep later. If I can't find sheep, then I can go to the library in the stronghold, if the stronghold has one, and then cut down spider webs to find string, and then make string into wool, and then make wool into beds. So I know that the stronghold is across the ocean, so I quickly make a boat, which is actually a pretty fast way of traveling. Then I continue using the Eyes of Ender to head to the stronghold. I accidentally stopped my timer here, so I didn't actually know what kind of pace I was on for the rest of this run. I just timed it using the video afterwards, so I know that my complete time. But during the run, nobody actually knew how good of a run it was, which was actually kind of nice for taking off the pressure. There isn't much to talk about here. I'm just sailing. It's pretty unfortunate if you have an underwater stronghold, because you dig much slower underwater, and it's pretty easy to suffocate before you're able to actually get far enough down to make an air pocket. So, fortunately, I was lucky enough here that it's actually on land. There's one interesting thing about Ender Pearls, or Eyes of Ender, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but my theory is thus. Eyes of Ender can either point to the opening staircase of the stronghold, or it can point directly to the portal room. My theory is that if you save and load the game after the stronghold is generated, then the Eyes of Ender will point to the opening staircase. But if you only save and load the game before the stronghold is generated, and you don't save and load after it's generated, then they'll point directly to the portal room. Which is kind of weird, because in order to duplicate items, you need to save and load the game. So the way it works is, if the stronghold is nearby to the village, or nearby to your spawn, then the eyes will point to the opening staircase, and you'll have to explore the stronghold to find the portal room. But if the stronghold is far away, then the eyes will just point directly to the portal room, which is ideal. That's my theory. I'm not sure if it's right. So the Eyes of Ender will sort of fly through the air high if you're far away from it, and once you get really close, they'll just sink into the ground. So you basically just triangulate the stronghold's position, and then the eyes will start moving directly to whatever they're pointing to. And in this case, they were pointing directly to the portal room, which was really nice. I also found sheep right above the stronghold, which was nice, so I gathered 3 wool so that I can make a bed. And here's the portal room. When you get here, you want to destroy the silverfish spawner and all the silverfish, because you're probably going to have to do some inventory management, and it's best not to get interrupted while doing that. You just place the Eyes of Ender around the portal, and then it'll come up. And now the only remaining thing is to arrange my inventory and to make enough beds to blow up the Ender Dragon. So I'm going to put down a table and craft a bed, and then do some duplication to make more beds. You can also place 2 blocks to block off the portal room if you really want to, but that's usually not required. Unfortunately, Creeper did come in, but he didn't really do anything bad. So here I'm going to do single item duplication to duplicate this bed. And since beds don't stack, if you want to duplicate more than 1 bed, you have to do multi-item duplication. So I'm going to duplicate twice more, because 8 beds is usually enough to kill the dragon. You can technically do it with 4, but that's usually pretty dangerous, because if you miss even 1 explosion, you're probably not going to be able to kill him with just the beds. I also duplicated my bows a few times earlier on, because when you get a bow drop from a skeleton, it has very low durability. Bows lose durability very slowly, but you'll still run out if you only have a single bow from a skeleton, so I made a couple of extra bows so that I could switch them out during the Ender Dragon fight. So after this duplication, I will have 8 beds, and then I just have to get my inventory ready and then enter the end. Another thing that helps to have during the end, which I didn't have here, is golden apples. So if you can find gold ingots and an apple, which you'll have to find in a chest somewhere, then you can make golden apples, and that's a very good way of healing. I actually got blown up by 2 creepers there, so I was kind of forced into the end before I was ready. But fortunately, I had everything ready pretty much anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. Sometimes you'll spawn out to the side, which is really annoying, because if the dragon hits you right away, you're pretty much dead, but I was able to get out before the dragon came along. So you're going to have to destroy pretty much all of these crystals. The dragon heals very quickly from the crystals, and even though you can deal a lot of damage to him in one go, he'll still heal up too fast even if there's 1 crystal nearby, unless it's like very far away and he just happens never to go near it. So you're going to have to destroy the crystals, and you have to deal with the bow to do that. If you have golden apples, you can use those to heal. Otherwise, just make sure that you have almost full food. And so long as your food is full or almost full, your health will regenerate continuously, which helps out a bunch. There are two ways of shooting ender crystals. One is just doing it from far away, like I'm doing here, where I try to angle it so that the arrow will hit it directly. Another way that I like to use for very difficult to hit crystals is by going very near to the tower and firing almost straight up, just like at a very slight angle. And that allows me to hit the crystal as the arrow is on its way down. I'm still working on it to get better at it, but I think that's an easier way of doing it than like making a huge staircase or making a huge pillar up to the crystal. So here I'm looking almost straight up and then firing it so that the arrow will hopefully hit the crystal while the arrow is falling back down. It usually takes quite a few tries because there's a large delay because the arrow has to like hit the top of its arc and start coming down, so you don't really know if you succeeded until later on. The dragon deals very little direct damage, so I'm not really worried about my health here. He only deals maybe a heart or a heart and a half, depending on what kind of armor you have. So you don't really have to worry about being hit directly. He can knock you off the platform, but that's really not all that common. Just sort of keep an eye on him, know where he is, and if he's coming straight at you, you can hit him with an arrow and he'll call off his charge. He's really not a very dangerous boss, he's just annoying at this stage. Also, in case you're not aware, the Endermen, which are the black enemies all around this area, will only aggro on you if you look directly at them. So long as your crosshair is not directly over them, they'll never attack you. And even if they do, just attack their feet a bunch, and they'll go down pretty fast. It might actually be worth it to kill one on purpose to try to get an Ender Pearl, which you can use to teleport into the ending portal. That saves a little bit of time as opposed to making a pillar up to it, but it's worth considering if you have to wait for the dragon to come down anyway. So I've got almost all of the Ender Crystals down now. I still have, I think, a few left to go, so right now I'm just looking around to see which ones are left. It's kind of tough to keep track of which ones you've gotten because a lot of them are on the top of very tall pillars and you can't see them unless you're at a very shallow angle, so I wasn't even sure if this crystal was still there, but once I saw the animation leading from the crystal to the dragon, I knew there was still one to get up here. So I just used my falling arrow strat to destroy it. I should really practice that. That took me a lot of arrows. Alright, so once you get all the Ender Crystals down, which I about did here, I was on my last bow, so I decided to duplicate it just in case I needed the extra durability. I ended up not needing it, but that was basically just for safety, to make sure it wouldn't break my bow before I was done with it. So once you have all the crystals down, you want to place down a bed and basically just stand on top of it and then wait for the dragon to charge you. Once he does start a charge, you want to walk to the opposite side of the bed and then lay down a brick and activate the bed from the opposite side of that brick. It'll usually take about 3 or 4 tries. Here I wasn't ready in time, so I wasn't able to do it. The dragon charges you pretty much whenever he feels like it, which can sometimes take a very long time, so sometimes you just have to wait a while. So this is pretty much the setup you want. Just stand on the other side of the brick and activate the bed from maximum distance. The closer you are to the bed, the more damage you'll take, and the purpose of the brick is to take less damage from the explosion. But as you can see, it dealt somewhere between a quarter to a third of his health in one explosion, so it's a very effective way of killing the dragon. I basically just look for a high elevation place on the ground that has a lot of flat ground around it. That gives you the best setup for setting up the explosion. I also have a theory that the dragon will tend to charge you more often if you're not looking at him, so sometimes I look away from him just sort of hoping he'll charge. I have no idea if that's actually true, but it makes me feel better to do it, so I do. And dragon is dead. If you picked up an Ender Pearl, you can just teleport inside the portal at the end, but if not, you can make a pillar up and then just sprint off of it to the portal. And that's the end of the run. 19 minutes, 31 seconds, current world record. It's not very good. I'm sure it can be improved. but I'm very glad to have gotten it, so thanks for watching. And if you want to see more speedruns, then follow me at twitch.tv/fearfulferret.